Hello everybody, and welcome to a new episode of the Stephen King podcast with me, Lilja, and Lou.
Hello.
Hello. In this podcast we are going to bring you the latest news as usual, but we are also going to talk about King's story Apt Pupil and the movie version of it, and after that we are going to talking about Petition to get the remake of Carrie re-released in a special edition with a lot of deleted scenes that are supposed to be out there. And I suspect we're going to have some different opinions about this one, so this will be an interesting discussion.
Yes, indeed, it will be.
Yeah, but let's start with the news first.
Welcome, welcome. Do not fear the door that lies before you. We will protect you. We are your guides, Hans and Lou, and we will give you the latest in Stephen King news. But before we do so, you must prove yourself worthy. You must open the door and join us in the death room. So first item up, and we're concentrating on movie news right now, is Bad Little Child, or Kid, is going to be turned into a movie. And this will be by Laurent Bourgeois and his production company Nedland Media. And he's usually done behind-the-scenes kinds of media, so this is interesting. And for those lucky people in Europe who have read the story, and for those people who couldn't wait and had it translated, this is a supernatural tale that centers on a man whose life has been changed when he realizes that a mysterious boy is causing death of people that he loves. So, as you remember, this was released as an e-story in German and French back on March 14, and there still has been no announcement of an English version of the story being released. I hope it's sometime this year, and for the movie, for sure. So, not surprising. If you remember, Hans, we did that story about Stephen King's back catalog and what would make good TV series, and we quickly realized that there's not a lot of stuff that hasn't been unadapted. So, to hear that this story is going to be turned into a movie is no surprise at all.
No, not at all. I was thinking about, I guess this is Laurent, is from the US, so I guess there has to be some English versions of this story out there. Or maybe he just bought the rights to it without having read it, since it's Stephen King.
Well, again, not knowing the story, I'm assuming that it's not it would not be a very, very expensive movie to make. It sounds like it's mostly within a few locations. So maybe that was one of the reasons why Mr. Borozzo was able to get the rights to this movie. He had also just done a 2011 Night at the Movies, the Horrors of Stephen King, which maybe he built up a relationship with King during that time, and they had some sort of a gentleman's agreement. If some project that interests Borozzo came up, that he would like to take a crack at a dramatic adaptation of it, and maybe this is Bad Little Kid was that opportunity. So. Yeah. Pure speculation on my part, though.
So it will be interesting to see that, and hopefully it will be released in English before the movie came out. So for nothing else to hype the movie.
Yep.
Okay, in next news we have some Under the Dome news. As has been reported earlier, Stephen King will make a cameo appearance this time, and a picture was released with him sitting in the diner. I don't know if I remember the name of it, but it was introduced in the first season, and he's drinking a cup of coffee. So I guess he won't have that big part, or maybe he will.
Yeah, we'll have to see.
Yeah,
no doubt it's a small one.
Yeah. It would be interesting to see where he's been hiding during season 1, though. Anyway, we also got a new trailer for season 2, and it seemed like something big was happening under the dome, and people were falling like flies. And that's pretty interesting, since they have announced that I think it's two main characters actually, that will die in the first episode. That's written by Stephen King, by the way.
Right.
So it will be interesting, and I hope there's, when they say main character, that they really mean main character. So it's not just one of those, but he was in an entire episode last season. thing. So
I wonder if it's going to be the boy and his girlfriend.
yeah, I want to die.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. And last of the Under the Dome news is that actor called Dwayne Boyd. I wasn't familiar with him, but he was in Sleepy Hollow. He played Officer Number 2. And he was in The Hunger Game, where he played Peacekeeper Number 1.
Oh.
So I guess he will play something like The Man Under the Dome
Citizen
Number 5.
Yeah, there you go.
Citizen Number 3.
Yeah.
I actually didn't know anything about him, so but he's been cast. So if anybody know him or know if he's any good, please let us know. But he's in this. He's going to be in season 2.
Yeah, I don't know much about him. As you said, he's played mostly fill-in roles, so it's really hard to say if he's a good actor or not. And I've watched Sleepy Hollow, and I don't really remember seeing him in that. Apparently, he was also in The Walking Dead. So, Hunger Games. Yeah, that was the first movie. Yeah, I'm just quickly running through his resume of appearances, and nothing's jumping out at me. So, and in fact, I'm looking at a picture of him. And he doesn't really ring a bell with me at all. So hopefully this is his big break, and hopefully he makes the best of it.
Yeah. Hopefully it's good though, because I like it when there are unfamiliar faces that you don't connect with any other blockbuster movies.
Sure.
So
yeah,
if it's good, I'm all for it.
Absolutely. Alrighty.
Yeah.
Next item up. Mr. Mercedes promo video. Stephen King was on Twitter a couple of days ago trying to link up a promo video that had been done for his book, and he finally got the correct link up, and then we all got to see it. And it's hard to believe it's just about a month away until the book is going to be in the stores. Yeah. And I have to say, I thought this was a fantastic promo. It really lays out what the story's all about, and it sets up this nice cat and mouse game between the retired detective and Mr. Mercedes.
Yeah, it's a really good promo that's very promising for the book.
Yes, and I kind of got I don't know if you know the actor, William Macy. He's been in a lot of stuff. Reminded me of that actor quite a bit. So he was in Umney's, he played the detective on Umney's Last Case.
Yeah, and he's really good.
Yeah.
So
I don't think, because this actor, you only see him from the back, he looks much younger than William Macy, but just the narration and his body language and body type, it reminded me of William Macy, so that was cool.
Yeah, and I like when they do promos like this.
Yeah.
Not just to release the books. I think they should promote it.
Yes. Hearing a lot of good things about it, and I can't wait for it to come out.
Yeah. Soon it will be out. And that brings us to the next news item. If you want to read it really early, you can always move to Holland, where the book is actually released on May 31st, which is three days earlier than the US. So the Dutch version of Mr. Mercedes will be the world premiere, world first edition of the book.
And it pains me to say that my ancestry, my parents are Dutch. I'm first generation Canadian, but I wouldn't be able to read this book at all. So I do see that there's some special collectible items with it too. I don't know what they are, but
yeah, I think they are releasing it, if I'm right, in both paperback and hardcover. And I think the hardcover will be numbered, and on the front there will only be the umbrella with the blood dropping on it.
Oh, okay.
For the hardcover. I think I saw that cover somewhere.
Okay. So
it's fun that they are doing something special about it. I guess it will make some fans in the US angry because they don't get the first edition. But being a European, I think it's nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And staying on the European tone, why don't you do the next story, Hans, since it has a special meaning for you?
Yeah. Stephen King's first book here in Sweden was released in 1980. That was Carrie. And for the last 34 years, we have been waiting. I think that when he was his most popular here in the late 80s, we maybe waited like half a year, maybe 8 months for a book. And lately we have been waiting for some books several years to be translated. So I have actually given up reading the Swedish book. But for about a year ago, a new publisher took over him here in Sweden. And they released 22/11/63, pretty close to the release date. And they released Dr. Sleep just a few months after the US release. And they just announced that in November 11, they will release Revival at the same day as it's released in the US. So that's fun for us Swedish reader. And actually, because we are about 6 hours ahead of you in the US will actually get the first edition of the book.
There you go.
Yep.
That's great news. I mean, especially in today's world where we're also connected through the internet and things like that, these staggered release dates are really, really annoying because you're hearing from other people that they've got the book or they've seen the movie. Like right now, like Spider-Man's been out for 2 weeks, I think, already in England, which makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
And basically, the movie just opened here, and it's pretty well been spoiled by the time we get to see it. So I don't understand these staggered release days anymore. In today's world, it's just impossible to avoid spoilers. And so I'm really glad to see that and I think all publishers, which is probably the hardest medium to do it. I think simultaneous publication is really the way to go. Whether it's just even if it's just an ebook and you or a bit later with the hardcover or whatever. Yeah, if you wait too long nowadays, people are just going to pirate it and whatnot. So it's definitely the way. Simultaneous releases are definitely the way to go.
Yeah, and I mean, for here in Sweden, when the publication was really bad, you noticed that more and more people read the books in English.
Right.
And because of that, the number of books that was sold of the Swedish copy went down, and that made them less reluctant to release the books early, and it would have ended with the books Swedish translations dying out totally.
Yeah.
So I think this is good. I don't know if it's more expensive to buy the rights to a book and publish it the same day or like a couple of years down the line. Yes, it could be, and that could be a reason as well that it's more expensive for the foreign publishers to buy it early. But
right.
I'm finally happy that and now I don't know if I'm going to read it in Swedish or in English because I'm so used to reading all the books in English because they aren't released here. But now I have a choice, so now I'm all confused.
Yeah, and I have to wonder, and it might be language specific, but I still have to think that if you translate a book from its original language into another language, you're still going to lose some subtleties of the author's style because a translator might pick a word. Like there might be 2 words that work the same for the one word in another language, but if the writer was there, he would pick one word and the translator might pick another word. So it will be interesting. I don't know if there are any industrious listeners out there, but if they do or ever have read translations and then the original English version of a Stephen King book, I wonder if they would mind sending us in some feedback to see how the 2 versions stacked up to them. Did they prefer one over the other? And again, it might be just a subjective individual taste thing for the reader, especially if they learn if their native language is not English and they learned another language later on, or vice versa. You might get different results because in your head, I think you always translate whatever you're reading into your native tongue. So it might be an interesting exercise to find out. So folks, if you've done that, read 2 versions of a King book, one in English and one in another language, and please send in your feedback and let us know what you think of it.
Yeah, and I think one reason for not reading in another language than your native language could also be that it takes you longer to read the book if you read it in a different language.
Yeah.
So that could be, you're getting more flow if you read it in your own language.
Yeah.
If you're not if you're not very good at the other language.
Yes, so. Yeah. And the chances that you're going to read the same story twice in a very short time period is pretty slight too.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I actually have a question for you.
Oh, for me or for the listeners?
For you. I just actually reminded. Yeah. Do you know how many languages Stephen King's books has been translated?
I've read it somewhere, but I think it's over 60 or something like that. It's probably more, but.
Yeah, well, actually, there isn't an official number. I've tried to get one, and I haven't gotten an exact number. Mm-hmm. But the languages that I know personally of are 42 languages. And I know of this because I have books in 41 of them.
Oh!
Yep.
Wow.
I've been collecting one book in as many languages as I can get.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
For a while, yeah. So I have 41 books in different languages. So those I know for sure that they exist. So now I'm just looking for a Vietnamese book. So if anyone have one lying around, get in touch.
There you go. All right, Up next, turning to the comic books, it looks like Marvel is continuing with the Dark Tower comic adaptation. I know they're doing the drawing of the 3. And that was recently announced by Peter David. And for you comic book fans, that's obviously great news. And also we've been told that now there will also be a miniseries from the drawing of the 3 called The Prisoner, and that will focus on Eddie Dean. And this will be drawn by Piotr Kowalski. He's best known for Marvel Knights Hulk. And this will be focused on Eddie Dean in New York City, or Brooklyn, I guess. And there's artwork that you can see up at Lilja's site. This article actually made Entertainment Weekly, which is interesting. There's also a link to see additional artwork. I have to say the piece that's colored doesn't really do a lot for me. But when you look at the other drawings that are black and white pencilings, some of them are pretty good. But I don't know, if to expand outside of the Dark Tower series with a side issue like this for Eddie Dean it's an interesting experiment. I hope it goes well for them, but I really would be interested to see how many people are actually going to be interested in buying that miniseries.
Yeah, the first thing that hit me when I saw those black and white drawings is, I guess this is Eddie Dean, who's the biggest of the boys sitting on the stairs, is that he looks just like Archie. With the hair and so I don't know. I guess that's not very good.
Yeah.
If he does. Yeah. But I have to say about the comics, I'm not such a big fan of them anymore. I read them at the beginning, but it's hard to read comics because it moves so slowly. The story moves so slowly, and you get like a new issue every month, and so little happen in each issue.
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty frustrating. So I think if I read a comic, I will wait until all issues are out, or like in an omnibus or something like that, and check that out.
Yeah.
I don't think I will be checking that out regularly when it's released.
Yeah, I'm the same as you, and I suspect there's a significant portion of the King fan base that were reading these comics, the first Dark Tower comics, as they came out. But I agree with you. It was too frustrating to read an issue, and then by the time you got the next one, you couldn't even remember what you had read in the previous one, and so you basically had to reread back from the beginning every time you got the next issue. And it's just, the story just seems too big for this format.
Yeah.
I mean, so the artwork was fantastic in that, and the production and the quality of these magazines, maybe for younger readers or a younger generation. But for myself, I need a lot more meat on my narrative, and the visuals in the comic book don't give me enough to keep me interested on an ongoing basis.
No, I think that if they released it like in an omnibus from the beginning with all issues at one point, I think it could work as a complement to the books.
Yeah.
Maybe not as it stand alone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, but I think if you got all the issues at the same time, it would have a much bigger chance to survive. Because I think, and that's what happened to me, that as you said, I read an issue, and when the next came out, you didn't remember the first one, and you lose interest in it that way.
Yeah.
It's too far ahead in between.
Yeah, and the amount of condensation that comics have to do, it's even worse than movies. You have to cut so much out of the story that it just feels like you're getting highlights instead of a real story. So. Yeah.
But I don't have a problem with them doing it. So for those who like it,
absolutely,
enjoy.
Yeah, I'm sure there's people out there that love that format of storytelling.
Yeah.
It doesn't work for me anymore. When I was younger, I loved it, but that was more like superhero stuff. But this is, especially for Stephen King stories, which are so broad. Yeah, this format really struggles, I think, to capture the story in a way that I find interesting.
Yeah. And the last news for today is, as you might remember, we mentioned this in an earlier podcast, an LP is released with the soundtrack music score from Creepshow was released, and it looked very promising when we got the first look at it, and now it's been released, and thanks to Amy Sandler, we got some really cool photos of it, and this looks like a really great product. Unfortunately, I don't have an LP player anymore, so I won't have any.
But it's a collector's item, Hans. You wouldn't play it anyhow.
Yeah, I guess. But it's very nice. You have illustration, you have text about it, you have photos from it, and the record itself, as I understand it, it was released in multiple colors, and you had one that had like blood splatter on it, and that's the one that Amy got here. And it looks amazing. So it's definitely, as you say, a great collector's items.
Absolutely, yeah. And I don't think any serious collector would even contemplate actually playing it. They might play it once, make a recording or something, or they'll probably get the CD version of it too, and just keep the record for the album for display.
They buy the record and download the music.
Yep.
Yep. But you should definitely go and check out those photos. And thank you very much, Amy Sandler, for sending those in.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's it for the news.
This is great. What's our job? We'd like drive around and pick up stiffs or what?
It's time for reviews from the night shift. All right. So up next, our review of the short story Apt Pupil and movie. And
yeah,
this story first appeared in Stephen King's 1982 collection, Different Seasons, and the movie version that we're all familiar with, that stars Ian McKellen and Brad Renfrew, came out in 1987. So Hans, why don't you set up the story?
Yes, the story is about a young boy who I think more or less is forced in class to do a project on the war crimes of the Nazis in the Second World War. And when he do that, he research and he finds a lot of picture, and he finds himself being actually interested in it in a way he didn't think he would be. And doing this, and one day when he rides the bus, he recognizes an old man. And it turns out that this old man is actually from the death camps that he's been studying about. So here he is, I think it takes place in 1984 or something like that. And he's find himself live Nazi concentration camp fellow who's done very bad things to a lot of people. So he confronts him, and after a while he actually admits that he is this Kurt Dusander, and as any normal boy would do, turn him into the police. That's the opposite of what Todd Bowden is doing. He doesn't want to turn him in. He wants to hear all the gory stories told to him. So he's fascinated by what happened and wants to know and wants to hear. And what he doesn't realize is that these things affects him in a way he could never imagine. He starts getting nightmares. He starts thinking about doing stuff to people that no normal boy should have thoughts about doing. His grades fall because he can't concentrate in school. And this is a boy who's previously is an A student. So naturally, his guidance counselor sends him a note home saying that he has to speak to his parents about this. And he can't show them this note because then they will know that he has his own pet Nazi that it's milking for all this information. So what he does is that he has his Kurt Dusander play his grandpa and making up a story that his parents are having troubles and everything. And he makes a deal with his guidance counselor that if Todd gets his grades back up, they should forget about all this. So now Kurt Dusander has one hold on the boy because he has played his grandfather, and everyone would know that he has this wish to learn about the Nazi violence instead of turning him in. So that it's like a cat and mouse game that they play with each other, trying to outsmart the other one and taking the consequences of it. So it's a really good story, I think.
Yeah, it's the novella is not one that gets mentioned very much, I don't think, when people talk about their favorite Stephen King stories, and neither does the movie. This is a lost or forgotten treasure almost.
Yeah.
Because once you get into the story, especially the movie version, it's really an engrossing picture, and it's not cheesy, and at times it's very disturbing and frightening. I think overall it's a very well acted movie, and Ian McKellen is, who of course we all know better nowadays as Magneto and Gandalf. Back when this movie was released, he was relatively unknown, but he's fantastic in this movie. Every time he's on the screen, I'm just mesmerized by watching him. I think he does a fantastic job as the Nazi here. I don't know what you thought of his acting in this movie, Hans.
Yeah, I think he did a great job, as you say, and you can really see, like in the scene where Todd gets him this uniform.
Yes.
And he's telling him to march.
Mm-hmm.
And he do this, and as he do this, you can see that he starts to enjoy it. And then it's Todd that's frightened for what he started.
Yeah.
So I agree that Ian McKellen is great in this movie. I'm not that happy with Brad Renfrew though. No, I should say this, that I listened to the audio version of this story read by Frank Muller, and he does a great job with it, as he do with all the Stephen King books he narrates. And I listened to this, and the day after I watched the movie, so I had them both very fresh and could compare them. And I'm not that fond of the movie actually. And I think that one thing they do the biggest problem is that they are moving too fast.
Mm-hmm.
In the story, you get the feeling that they are feeling each other out, and you get more description of Todd when he finds this Doosander and how he tracks him down and what the Doosander do to try to fool him. And in the movie, they just bam, 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 and they are halfway in, and he's telling him war stories. So it felt very rushed, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Movie. And then it's almost like 2 hours long, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
So I think they could have done it better. And one thing that I also didn't like is that the Todd in the movie is too much secure of himself.
Mm-hmm.
In the story, he's very unsecure, and he's basically uncertain that he is actually the right guy until he admits to it.
Yeah.
So the scene where he confronts him in the movie is very fast, and then okay, it's me. But in the book, he's more conflicted that maybe I'm wrong. Should I run away? And so it's more depth in the story as it usually is. But I think that since this is such a short story, it could have been done much better as a movie, I think.
I totally understand where you're coming from in terms of this movie rushing the story. I mean, in general, that happens anyhow, but I think the reason why it's more noticeable here is the whole subplot about Doosander, who is the Nazi war criminal that McKellen's playing, ends up bringing home a bum, a migrant, and it kills the guy, but it's a botched attempt, and it ends up giving him a heart attack. And there's the race to distance Todd from Doosander. And that portion of the movie, I think that whole thing with him picking up that bum, to me that scene wasn't necessary. That whole story arc wasn't necessary. If they would have cut that out and just moved to Doosander having a heart attack, that would have allowed more time up front for the uncertainty of Todd, whether or not he even had the right guy. They could have played that out a bit longer. And I agree with you. I think that would have been a more interesting movie.
Yeah.
The stuff with that guy he picked up was just a waste of time, really.
He does that in the story as well. Gets people home and kill them and bury them in his cellar. He actually buries quite a few that I find. So it's in there, but
it was more dragged out in the movie.
Yeah, they could have done it differently in the movie, definitely.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you with Renfro, but I actually thought that and again, it speaks to the acting talent of Ian McKellen. I thought when it was just the two of them on the screen, I thought he did a really good job. But the stuff that he did outside of those scenes with his parents and at school and that stuff wasn't that great.
No.
It's weird in this movie to see a lot of the supporting cast is now people that have gone on to do more famous things, and nobody knows who Brad Renfro is anymore, really. But you got, David Schwimmer from Friends, before Friends, which is undermines the seriousness of the moment, and that's just one of those unintentional things because now we all know him from Friends. Yeah. You see Joe Morton, of course, is front and center in the Terminator 2 movie and things of that nature. So another famous actor that you've seen, and of course our old friend Bruce Davidson from Kingdom Hospital is here as well, with much longer hair.
Yeah.
So
I thought that hair is really disturbing, I think.
Yeah. So those are some of the weaknesses of it. But again, I have to circle back to, I think the scenes between Renfro and McKellen are worth alone for watching this movie for. Especially, there's two scenes that really stand out for me, or three actually. Well, two. The second one's kind of an extension of a bunch of little ones. But the first scene, of course, is when Renfro or Todd gives McKellen the uniform, and he just tells him to start marching. And then at a certain point, Todd is in control of Doosander, but at a certain point during that march, Doosander takes over control, and Todd can't stop him, and he's actually afraid of him. And Doosander's character really comes to life while he's marching with that suit, and you can see a glimpse of how powerful and how evil he was back in his prime. So I thought that sequence was really well done. It was really spooky watching that march, turn right, march, and after a certain point, Todd lost it and then lost control. And then the other scene that I really liked is after Todd's managed to get his grades back up, and they're talking about what were they going to do now. And McKellen says, well, I'm going to tell you a story, but I can tell you about the special soap we had, or one time I was stupid enough to go back to Berlin and I almost got caught. But I don't think you're in the mood for those kind of stories, so I'm going to tell you a story about an old man and a young boy. And then he says he's got his life journal in a safety deposit box in a bank. Yeah. So at that point in the movie, Todd has totally lost control, because he screwed up with his grades in that. He gave Doosander a lever to use as blackmail against him, and now they're even. Yeah. And I just love the turning of the tables there of Dusandre and Todd. So that's another great sequence as well. And then at the end, he says, "You can go F yourself." And he says, "My boy, don't you realize that we're both Fing each other?" That is such a great scene. And Ian McKellen, really, if for nothing else, it's worth watching the movie just for his portrayal of this character. He is just fantastic. Yeah. So many little subtle inflections in his voice and his body language while he's talking to Todd, saying one thing to him but meaning another. It really adds a lot to those scenes. And that's the thing that you get with these older actors that I really come to enjoy as I get older myself, is they're the ones that tend to hold the story together. And he did it in Lord of the Rings, and in Star Wars, Alec Guinness held that movie together. These old mentor-type characters that have a good stage and Shakespearean background, they can really make some of this corny stuff really sound believable. Or they can sell it a lot better than like a young actor like Todd Renfrew. He couldn't carry a movie like this on his own. No. So
actually, I agree with all those scenes that you were mentioned, but I think that in all those scenes you could have replaced Renfrew with another actor, and they would still be as good as they are, because I think they are all Ian McKellen.
Yes. Oh, yes. There's a large part of it is due to McKellen, no doubt. But he gives those younger actors something to play off of, right? Where in this movie, like, it's really weird seeing Joshua Jackson from Fringe and the Mighty Ducks as his friend. Yeah. But there's no real chemistry there between them. Yeah. The other part of the movie that I'm disappointed with, and I can understand it, and maybe in retrospect it's probably better, they didn't show how Todd ended up in the movie as he did in the book. In the book, he's killed after he's killed a bunch of people, and understandably, I think that would have been, it's too close to his rage story. So I'm probably pretty sure Stephen King is happy that version wasn't filmed, especially with these reoccurring reports about kids that are going to do things at school, and one of their favorite writers is Stephen King, which is it's a sad commentary. But I did kind of like the ending here, where Todd tells the guidance counselor to mind his own business or he'll mess him up real bad.
Yeah, but
that is a nice scene.
Yeah, but I didn't really buy that. I mean, if he would have the guidance counselor, Ross with a mustache,
yes,
would have. I could only see the big mustache.
Yeah.
But I mean, if he would have gone to the police and told them that this young boy was involved with this Nazi war criminal, and he could prove it as well, I mean, nobody would believe anything Todd would have told him. So I think he could have crushed his allegations of, or his insinuation that he would accuse him of molesting him.
Yeah.
I think he would have been able to crush them pretty easy. So I think I don't really buy that he just, okay, I'll go my way and you live your life.
Yeah, that didn't quite work for me.
So it was a bit easy, I think.
Yeah, and it's just like in the movie, the part that really didn't work for me was when, who's the character's name? Joe Morton's character, the cop, along with the Nazi hunter, were questioning him, and they didn't even twig on to the fact that he knew all about this background of this character. Especially that Nazi hunter guy, like you think he would be able to sense if he's telling the truth or not, set up some sort of trick that would trip up Todd. So I didn't really buy that neither one of them thought that he didn't know anything about Dusandre's background. So that was the most, along with the threatening of the teacher, the guidance counselor, those were the two elements that didn't really work for me at all.
That's the difference also with the ending of the story, and I'm going to spoil it now, so if you don't want to hear it, you better hold your ears a few minutes, because in the story they do suspect that he's lying, and they are pretty sure that he knows more than he's saying, the cops. And as the guidance counselor in the book comes to confront him, he shoots him, and then he goes off shooting a couple of people, and then he's killed. So it's a more brutal ending in the book, but it feels more true to the story. Even though it's a horrible ending when people, if he would do those acts, but I think it's a more ending that's true to the story than the one we get in the movie.
Yeah, absolutely. What works in the 80s, I think nowadays, I don't think that ending would. Yeah, it would have been very interesting to see what people would have thought of this movie. Maybe this movie would be more famous or infamous if they stuck to the book ending. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think it would have been rage. I think it might have became a rally cry for some of these individuals that have these issues and end up doing these crazy things like this.
Yeah.
And I didn't get this.
I think it would.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think it would have been better if maybe when the guidance counselor confronted him, that he would have said, "Okay, let's go tell everybody about this. Just let me get my," I was almost saying hat, but he didn't wear a hat.
Mm-hmm.
My jacket, and then he went in and shot himself. I think that would have been a better ending.
Yeah.
That everything just went on.
Mm-hmm.
With like nothing happened.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see a sequel and see where Todd is nowadays. Huh?
Yeah, that could
I'm
be
surprised that hasn't happened yet, to be honest. So it's not a comfortable story to sit through, and it's in a territory that's such a hot topic button nowadays that I can understand why this film probably is not as well received or mentioned by people. Plus, it's not a feel-good movie by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a very interesting. It's an allure to certain types of things, and you see that in those flashes when McKellen's character, who is wearing that Nazi uniform, there's some kind of power there that of evil. It's very interesting to watch, and I think it says a lot about why things did happen the way they did during the World War IIs and that. So
yeah, definitely. And we have to mention that there is actually almost another adaptation of this story, because back in 1987, 1 year before this version that we have been talking about was done, British director Alan Bridges began to film his version of this story. And in that one we had Ricky Schroeder, who you might know from NYPD Blue and other stuff. He was cast as Todd, and the British actor Nicol Williamson was cast as Dusander. But as they filmed it, and they had actually filmed like 3/4 of it, they ran out of money, and the movie was cancelled. So it was never finished.
Yeah.
But apparently King saw it and remarked it as a really good movie. So maybe this one would have been better. I don't know.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to find if anybody has a screenplay of the original movie. It's an interesting project because the producer had also lined up some different actors to play Dusander. Producer Richard Corbett. I'm just looking here on Wikipedia about this. I'm just finding out about this stuff. At one point he had James Mason had agreed to play the part, but then he died in 1984 from a heart attack just before it was going to start production, so that delayed it. And he had also approached Richard Burton for the role, but by the time they got around to production again, Burton had died as well. So, and they almost had an opportunity to, about a year later, to resume shooting on the picture, but in that intervening year, Schroeder had grown too much, so they couldn't match the footage of him from the earlier production against what they would be shooting going forward. So about 40 minutes of usable footage had to be thrown out. So very interesting.
I guess they didn't shoot it in chronological order.
Oh,
because then they could have used him because some time passes.
Yeah, maybe, yeah, but no, that's very rare that you shoot in chronological order. You usually shoot each location before you move to the next one. Yeah. So that's very interesting.
It would be very interesting. Yeah, it would be very interesting to hear what kind of ending that movie had.
Or if the footage still exists. Yeah. I'd love to see it. Yeah. But yeah, Nicol Williamson I know best from, he played Merlin on the Excalibur film, if you've ever seen that. So it would have been an interesting interpretation. James Mason, that would have been really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. It would have been kind of like his striker character from Salem's Lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that would have been cool. So yeah, I didn't even know about this alternative take on the film until we started talking about it today. So that's really cool to find out something new about a Stephen King related work. So there you go.
So how do you think about the movie? Is the movie worth seeing?
Absolutely. I put it. It's not in the top tier. Like there's like the Shawshanks, the Green Miles, Misery. I'm sure I'm forgetting another movie right now, but The Shining. But this one's maybe a rung or two below those ones, and then I think in between them would be like a Stand By Me or something like that. So that this is a really solid grade B movie, not a B type movie, but I'd give it a B, whereas the really good movies are A's. But it's worth seeing just for Ian McKellen's performance, if nothing else.
Yeah, I would say like see the movie for Ian McKellen and try to forget the rest. I don't know, maybe it's because I had the story so very fresh in my mind and I compared it, and if you compare the two, the movie is lacking very much and the ending is pretty lame compared to the story one. But if you haven't read the story in a while, maybe you would enjoy the movie more. So maybe that's the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you should definitely read the story as well if you haven't already. It's a good story. Very good.
Yep.
Okay. That's it for Apt Pupil. Oh, and send in your comments, of course, what you think about it, both the movie and the story, if you agree or not with us.
And now on to Mailbag. Okay, so final item on the docket is we got a letter, or email, I should say, from Bryant Burnette, who pointed out to us that apparently the theatrical release of the recent Carrie movie was one that was heavily edited before it actually got from the post-production phase out into the theaters. And that those edits contain a lot of extra scenes that follow more closely to the book. There's a different ending to the movie. There's a lot more of the trial and the commissioner's hearing into what happened. And it also changes, it gets rid of the stones dropping on the house at the end of the movie. So there is a petition to get a extended cut of the Carrie remake. They're trying to get 20,000 signatures. And I'll put in the links as to where that is, that you can do that. And there's also a Facebook page for it. So I've added my signature to it, and I would be very interested to see what the difference is in these deleted scenes. And because I think one of the big disappointments of the remake is that it follows the original so closely, whereas the deleted scenes makes it seem like the book or the movie was going to follow the book a lot more closer. So I'm all for this. I'd love to see this alternative take, but I know, Hans, that you have a different feeling about this.
Yes, I have. First of all, I think that this version of Carrie is not so good. In fact, I think it stinks.
Ooh, wow, that's harsher than when we talked about it.
Yeah, well, it has so many faults, both character-wise and story-wise and special effects-wise when Carrie is doing her things and so. And some of these extra scenes are included on the DVD, including the different ending. Or at least one of them, as it supposedly are 4 endings, I think. But one of them, at least, is included in the DVD release of this movie. I don't think any of these scenes makes any difference in making the movie better, as far as I have seen. So I think that if they would do like a special edition and use these scenes as deleted scenes and explain why they deleted them and how they thought when they did them and why they thought they would work, that would be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But to just cram them into the movie just to get the movie fuller or with more scenes, I don't think that would make the movie better. I think it, on the contrary, would make it worse.
Okay. Well, folks, you feel free to chime in on how you feel about it. And as I mentioned earlier, there are links on the Facebook page and for the petition that I'll include when we post up the podcast. But it'd be very interesting, not just to get these deleted scenes in a cut that would make the movie closer to book, but just to find out, and we probably never will, is the thought process about why the movie was changed apparently as much as it was, and it ended up being so similar to the remake. So those are very interesting stories that I always like to find out about the behind the scenes stuff. So that's why I am all for this petition to get these recut of the movie done. So yeah. Let's hear from you guys. Let's you all chime in and see how you feel about it.
Yeah, one interesting thing about the information we get on this page here is that apparently there's one scene where Carrie, all bloody, holds a newborn baby in her arms. That's inserted in the movie, I think, or if it's in the alternative ending, I'm not sure. But the scene is only 1/24 of a second long. You can imagine how fast that is. But if you do it frame by frame, I think you can actually get the picture to see it. So and that's interesting that they would include such a short scene just in there. I like that. That's like an Easter egg or something like that.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to hear as well. Why did they do that? Is it because they want to see if someone finds it,
mm-hmm.
or does it have any meaning, or is it just a fun thing? But I think to get, if you want to get the full extent of all this material, that is some we know exist and some are at least I took it when I read it, are speculations because someone have said that this happened and stuff. So we don't know if all of this exists. But what I would be interested in is getting it like extra material and explained the process of why they filmed it, why they didn't use it, how they thought, not just put into a different version of the movie.
Yeah, that's pretty well where I'm at too. So I'd like to I'd like to see the material, and I'd like to hear the reasoning about why the cuts or edits that were made. But I doubt that we'll ever find out about why that happened. Yeah. So, and the movie's come and gone, so it'll be very hard to get anybody to want to step forward about it as well.
Yeah, I would be very impressed if this petition gets this special edition made, because I mean, let's face it, they are up against multi-billion-dollar company who has done this movie, and as you say, they are done with it, and so it would be very impressive if they can get them to make this. Yep.
Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed, and folks, check out those links and just add your voice to the ones that are already there.
Yeah, definitely.
Alrighty, so that is the podcast for today. Well, why don't you set us up for what we're going to be doing next on the next one, Hans?
Yes, next time we are going to take a look at Salem Slot, and we're going to focus on the TV series from 1979.
Wow.
And the main reason for this is that Lou has invested in a new book.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, the Salem's Lot, a study in modern horror, and I'm about halfway through the book right now, and it's got a lot of fantastic photos. The written stuff seems a little bit on the light side, but it's an interesting time capsule because it's got interviews with King from 1987, around that time as well. So it's a lot of reprints from various film magazines. But yeah, there's some great behind-the-scenes pictures in it, and it'll be good to put that in context of this miniseries and the other miniseries. And surprise, surprise, there's even another series, right, Hans?
Yeah, you have the original series, you have the new miniseries, as you mentioned, which is a remake, and you actually have a sequel to the first miniseries that I think is actually a movie. I don't think it's a series, which is called Return to Salem Slot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we almost have to have a prize for the one who can find that one on DVD.
Yeah.
Because we have looked, and this is a very hard movie to find. It's released on
VHS.
What's it called? Yeah, exactly. The old format, like a cassette tape that you.
Yep. For you youngians out there.
Yep. You have probably never seen it, but it's an interesting movie and probably be very bad. But we want to talk about that one as well as the others and the book.
Mm-hmm.
So check out your Salem Slot and send in comments and questions and any other thing you can think about for this one.
Yep. And for those that are really curious about it, if you go to Amazon, I just Googled it there, it's available for $20. Return to Salem's Lot, 1987. Michael Moriarty, Samuel Fuller, Larry Cohen, director. So
there you go. Just make an investment.
It's only 100 minutes long, so
yeah.
And that'll be interesting to see what they did and if they tie it into the miniseries at all. And the cover of it looks very close to Salem's Lot, actually.
Yeah.
Slight differences. It's got the same Nosferatu-style vampire on the cover, which is cool.
It would be very interesting to see how many bought this one by mistake.
Yeah.
They bought Salem Slot.
Yeah.
I would say like maybe 75% of all sold copies. Okay, that's it. And take care. And until next time, stay scared.
But stay safe.
Stay safe.
All right. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.